I made a video about your videos, I refer to as the greatest actor of our generation, maintaining this bit, and I'm gonna just jump in it with Alex. What for those that are there's a bunch of people in the chat, they have no idea what's going on. They're like, "What is it?" You have done this what is presumed by so many people to be a bit, but you've done it so well that people are questioning whether you're doing a bit. And if you look at the comments on your Instagram, when you make these videos where you say, like, the man should pay, and so he goes, well, then you should pay. And you're like, oh, how dare you? It's split between, I see these comments from leftists, and they're saying things like, I don't know if you're trying to joke or not, but, please be careful when you're presenting an image about trans women. Like,
Yeah, and it's not intentional. I'm just being me, but I have noticed that both conservatives and the far left seem to have opinions on what I do, and some of them like me and some of them dislike me. But it's very interesting to see how many people are outing themselves as bigots, especially on the left, and are trying to police my body and my voice and things like that.
Josh Sider, yes, the same guy you probably forgot existed, after his stint on The Bachelorette season 11 in 2015, is back in the spotlight. But not for any reason you'd expect. You'd think a washed up reality star would try to stay relevant by getting involved in some kind of influencer drama or maybe a Dancing with the Stars cameo. Nope. Instead, Josh decided the best way to reclaim attention was by pretending to be a trans woman for 5 months.
The thought of themselves being women. And I think a lot of trans women are turned on at the thought of themselves being women. Guess what? It doesn't magically make them women. It doesn't mean we have to accept that they're women. They are simply men turned on at the thought of themselves being women. That's great. We live in a free country. You can do whatever you want, but don't make your fetish my truth. I don't have to accept it. To go to the second part of your question, how did I come up with this? I was talking with some friends, and we said this is patently false. Men do not magically become women. I said, let's look at the medical literature and what it says. It says that trans people don't have to transition, don't have to have gender dysphoria, don't have to get surgery, and don't have to get hormones. If they feel they are a different gender than their bio-sex, then they are trans and they are valid. And I said, understandably, this is ridiculous. Then I can present exactly how I am, and I can be trans and valid if I say that's my gender identity. And so I said, let me prove how ridiculous this is using reductio ad absurdum by being trans for 5-6 months, and hopefully people will understand then how ridiculous this is.
I definitely understand how ridiculous it is, but...
And why did he do it? Not for self-discovery or an actual life change. He did it to prove a point about how, in his brilliant mind, ridiculous transgenderism is, because nothing screams, I'm a social and cultural authority, like being a man wearing makeup and a dress for nearly half a year.
And so I'm just being me, but during this process of my transition, people are outing themselves for the narrow-minded, myopic people that they are, and it is what it is. I'm just being me.
Well, the chat said this. It's a good question. What is a woman?
Well, again, I would defer to the science. So if you follow the science now, the NIH, WHO, WPATH, it all says that someone can be a biological male. But their gender and their gender identity is determined by them and them only. And so if we just follow the science, a woman is whoever wants to be a woman. And I know Matt Walsh has spoken on this and, done the movie or whatever, but if you follow the science, that's what they say. And we choose our gender. But there is biology, and biologically, I was born a male. I was assigned male at birth by a doctor, but I identify as a woman. So
in May 2024, Josh made a big public announcement coming out as transgender. Social media posts, interviews, you name it. He fully leaned into the identity of a trans woman, sharing his thoughts on what it was like to live that experience, and even calling for The Bachelor to step up its game and cast a trans lead. I mean, why stop at half measures when you're already playing pretend? For 5 months, he crafted an image of a person struggling through the complexities of gender identity. He talked about receiving death threats and online abuse, trying to paint himself as some kind of martyr for the cause. Turns out that Josh Sider is a self-described mental health advocate who himself needs a mental health advocate. People, unsurprisingly, had mixed reactions. Some applauded him, some were skeptical, but most probably just didn't care enough to give it more than a passing glance. After all, reality TV stars reinvent themselves constantly to stay relevant. So maybe this was just another phase in Josh's endless quest for attention. But then the real kicker came. In a bombshell twist that only makes sense if you remember this guy's reality TV roots, he had orchestrated the entire thing as some bizarre social experiment to show how, in his words, ridiculous being transgender is. Let's unpack that. For half a year, this guy went through the motions, pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman. It reminds me of the bold lib, Angela Belcamino. Many people say she's playing the satirical role of your typical corporate Democrat influencer with a football field-sized forehead. Well, hold up. If every day you play the part of a corporatist with a forehead so big it could show a movie in IMAX, then you really are a corporatist. It's not an act any longer. That is who you are. According to Sider, he wanted to expose what he believes to be the absurdity of gender identity, thinking his little charade would somehow flip a switch and make everyone wake up to his version of reality. He even boasted about how he did it using the logic of reductio ad absurdum, as if spending 5 months destroying what little manhood he had to begin with would lead to some intellectual enlightenment. It's almost laughable, except it's not. It's just incredibly sad. Imagine the level of narcissism it takes to assume that you, of all people, can waltz into one of the most complex, deeply personal issues of our time, pretend to live it, and then expect applause for proving it's not valid. Josh Sider's actions go beyond being a cringe-worthy stunt. They're a toxic, dangerous misrepresentation of an experience that countless people actually live. People who might be mentally damaged and don't have the luxury of taking off that identity like it's some costume. And let's talk about how delusional you have to be to think dressing in women's clothes and pretending to be trans for 5 months equates to understanding what it means to actually think you are transgender. This wasn't some profound philosophical experiment. This was just another reality TV washout desperately clinging to relevance. And when everything else failed, he decided to use the transgendered group as his prop, no different than the Democrat Party does. With their fake rainbow love, the worst part, he genuinely seemed to believe that this experiment would have some grand impact. He thought that at the end of this 5-month circus, people would be throwing confetti, celebrating him for exposing the truth about gender identity. I miss the 90s. Back then, Josh would have admitted he was as gay as RuPaul. The problem is, it would have been like when Tevin Campbell came out the closet. No one would have cared because we already knew. So instead, to make noise, he does this bad Dylan Mulvaney impression. Spoiler alert, Josh, the only person you exposed was yourself. Pause. The sheer arrogance and ignorance of your so-called experiment only revealed how little you understand about the issues you were mocking. It didn't prove anything about transgenderism. It only proved that you're willing to do whatever it takes for attention, no matter how low you have to stoop. When Sider made his big reveal on Alex Stein's show, which is a great show, by the way, he acted as if he was delivering some groundbreaking epiphany to the world. But the reality is, he just confirmed what most people already suspected, that he's a guy who's completely out of touch with real issues, using shock value to keep his name in the headlines. The only thing that's ridiculous here is thinking you can watch yourself in the mirror putting on lipstick for a few months and not realizing the joke's on you. He's just another example of what happens when you play the fool for too long. You end up becoming one. Josh wanted to expose something absurd about being trans, but all he exposed was his own ignorance. In the end, the only absurdity here is that anyone ever thought this stunt was worth taking seriously. If Josh was hoping this stunt would make people see things differently, well, congratulations. We see you now, Josh, the real you, and it's not a good look.